Life, and we are back talking about movies, some of the best coming out this summer. So, of course, we're back with Rob Rector on the Coast Life couch. Now, before we get into the blockbuster, the history, why so many great movies are coming out right now, we have a question for you.
Okay,
so earlier this week, Leah and I were talking. The Princess Leia dress is up for auction right now. We talked about what movie props we would buy from an auction for $1 million if we had it. What movie props would you want to buy?
so there are two that I'm thinking of just off the dome. The first, and this kind of goes in line with what we were talking about today, but I would have to purchase the bullwhip from the original Raiders of the Lost Ark. I've had a million dime store knockoffs that you would end up injuring yourself with or terrorize a cat with. So I would love to have the authentic one that was held by Harrison Ford in there. And then the second one, and I saw it on an auction not too long ago, but it was the face hugger from Alien.
Oh.
That little xenomorph thing with the that went on the that to me, just so I could creep my kids out, walk out in the morning or wake them up in the morning with that'd be awesome. So
I knew this answer would be cool in an hour.
Right?
Dang it. That's awesome. All right, well, we were talking though about movies coming out right now. I'm curious because you always seem to hear it. These movies, and they're the most anticipated, and they come out all at once. What's up with that?
Yeah, and they're called blockbuster, and that actually came from the original. So back in 1975, and prior to that, really a little bit, but 1975 was really the birth of what is now called the blockbuster, and that's a little film by an indie director. You might not have heard of him. His name's Steven Spielberg, and the film is Jaws. Jaws was released, and it literally, because it was in these single theater movie houses around the country, they would actually have people who would line up around the block, hence the term blockbuster. So that is what, and Jaws would play in the same theater for like 6 months, a year. I mean, it would play over and over and over again. So then it started to accelerate. A couple of years after that, you had Star Wars, the original Star Wars, New Hope, and they realized that this is the time where kids have off from school, you can do repeat. And as the years progressed, you started to see this summer window kind of widening a little bit. So now March really starts the summer movie season when they have the big tent pole, as they call them, the tent pole films, and then it goes all the way till September. Really is when they release the ones that they hope they're going to recoup their losses on. So now whether they've done that yet this summer, it remains to be seen. I know that the latest Indiana Jones film it's one of the most expensive. Not only is it one of the most expensive Indiana Jones movies, but it's also one of the most expensive movies ever. I think the budget alone was at $300 million, and that's before the marketing budget. So they're probably everything closer to $400 million.
Buy a couple of Princess Leia dresses.
And they would have to recoup. It's got to give perspective. The last Indiana Jones movie, the Crystal Skull, which came out a few years ago, was $185 million. It went on to make $700 and some odd million, but it's going to have to do a lot to recoup that budget back.
I'm curious too, and I was just started thinking about this as you're explaining the history of the blockbuster. Obviously, when the pandemic hit and things closed down and they got back open, the movie theaters weren't packed. Do you think that the movies coming out in the past couple of years, is this really what's pushing people to get back into theaters? Are you seeing it grow again?
Yes, but also we're seeing some more refined taste, I think. Like something that The Flash is a perfect example. The Flash was supposed to be, again, a tentpole film for DC, and controversies aside, put all the other stuff surrounding it aside, it was relatively well received. It was like 65% by Fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. So, it was generally just your typical superhero movie. It bombed. I mean, it barely made first place. It's now not even expected to. It had the steepest second week drop of any film, like 70%. So I think people are starting to be a lot more discerning with their taste of what they're going to go out to the theater for. And whether it is a name brand or whether it is unique and something that they haven't seen before remains to be seen. But I think they are returning, but they are also being very particular about what they're going to see.
I can see
So-
that. I mean, it's not very often that you get movies that, I mean, I think it is maybe every decade or so that you get a movie like Jaws, like Star
Yeah.
Wars, where
Right.
it's either sort of the pinnacle of the current technology that's blowing everyone's
Exactly.
mind, or the story is so strong. And I'd be curious to see if we ever return to sort of like practical effects.
Well,
And I think that's where like Fury Road was one that I remember blew my mind because
Top
I was
Gun.
like, it looks so real.
Yeah.
Top Gun Maverick.
Mhm.
You know, that one I never would have guessed that would have been one of my favorite films of last year, much less the success that it was.
Yeah.
But it relied a lot on practical effects, and it was just a well-oiled machine, and
Yeah.
it did really well. But like you were saying, it was a good story. It was a
Mhm.
solid story. It was something we all cared about. There was recognition, but not a ton. That's not something that like screamed it needed a sequel.
Yeah.
But still, they came out in droves for it, and it turned out to be the #1 of last year. And he could do it again this year
Sure.
with Mission Impossible. I mean, from what I hear, it's being well received.
How do you
So-
think Avatar's going to do? Because they have them planned out. What is it, every 5 years or something?
Yeah, yes.
Do you
There's
think that should have just been left
4
alone?
more. I don't underestimate. I'll never underestimate James Cameron.
Fair enough.
You know, I mean, I never will, because I thought the second one was really good. It was a serviceable sequel. I just don't know how much longer we can sustain that world
Yeah.
and that new technology. I would love to see him start to go in different directions because he is such a solid action director. You know, we could use him on creating something new as opposed to revisiting Pandora over and over.
That's a
Where your
great
head's
point.
at.
That's a great point. As much as I love that movie. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's fair,
yeah.
Oh man, well we could talk to you all day. I have a lot of other questions.
Sure.
But I won't keep you guys. You'll have to come back and answer
Absolutely.
once Barbie airs too.
You just have to buy more pink.
That's fine.
Okay.
Fair enough.
We
All
will.
right.
All right, well, hey, don't forget, let us know.